G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby. My name is Mark and I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. And in this video I'm going to be reviewing the game that was played between England and Argentina in Pool D of the Rugby World Cup. Well, I don't know about you, but I was really looking forward to this game before it was played, and unfortunately it really let me down because well, there's lots to discuss I guess about this game. You can see it a number of different ways, but I was looking forward to the clash between Argentina and England because I thought this was going to be one of those games where two teams were going to really find themselves in this year's Rugby World Cup and kick off their campaigns with a really tight and interesting battle. But it turned out to be very different than that. And what I usually do in my videos is do a blow-by-blow commentary of the game. I'm not going to do that in this one because I think that because of the nature of the game it would turn into a rather boring video. So I just thought I would talk about the different aspects of the game and what both teams brought to the game, and perhaps more about what both teams didn't bring to this particular game. Now, there's no doubt about it, it was important for both teams to get a win in this first game in Pool D, and I think that was really going to be the main strategy of both Michael Cheika for his Argentinian team, as well as Steve Borthwick from the England team. And of course, Borthwick has been copping a lot of flack from people because of the nature of the way that England have been playing in their warm-up games, and a lot of people have been writing them off, yet they are in that easier side of the draw. As far as Argentina was concerned, I think a lot of people were giving them some confidence in being able to take England out in this game. I was one of those people, and that was merely on the back of their performances in the Super Rugby Championship against New Zealand, South Africa and Australia. I thought Argentina had played quite well in some of those games, or at least in portions of those games, and compared to where England was at in their build-up trajectory, it looked to me as though Argentina was going to have enough to get over top of England. What I was most interested to see in this game was whether England could play any kind of expansive game, score some tries, get their confidence up through that process, rather than going to their typical kicking strategy and trying to win the game through a fairly dour and boring process. But it didn't take long to realise once the game had started that England were going to adopt a kicking strategy, and that didn't mean that they didn't run the ball. They tried to run the ball at the Argentinian defence, but in the early minutes of the game the Argentinian defence was up to making sure that England were kept out. Now, I guess one of the most notable things that happened in this game happened within the first 2 minutes, and that was Tom Curry was sent to the field. A disappointing start to the Rugby World Cup campaign for Tom Curry. Of course, he's just come back after that very long layoff because of injury, and now getting his first run in this year's Rugby World Cup. Red carded for a questionable challenge. I'm not sure what Tom Curry was supposed to do in that situation. Was he supposed to just disappear? He was confronting the Argentinian player on a 50-50 ball, and I think this is where this law is a little bit unjust when it comes to players trying to compete for the ball. He really had nowhere to go. He couldn't pull out of that particular tackle, I thought, and rather than a tackle, it was more of a contest, and unfortunately he got his body in the wrong position. And the law does state that if you're going in and it results in a head clash like that, then it is a card situation. Maybe the law needs to be looked at. But Tom Curry was off the field, and England were down to 14 men after the yellow card was assessed and upgraded to be a red card by the bunker system that we have in play for this year's Rugby World Cup. So how were England going to handle the fact they were down to 14 men, and what strategy were they going to put into play? Well, it was pretty obvious as soon as Curry went off what England were going to do, and it was all going to be about keeping territory, kicking down and making strategic gains on the Argentinians, and putting in massive defence. That was the strategy that England adopted in this particular game. And it worked because they really unsettled Argentina. And whereas you would think Argentina would come into this game with a good opportunity to out-scrum and out-muscle England in the forwards, that simply didn't happen in the beginning of the first half. As is often the case when a team goes down to 14 men, the rest of the group really gets together, combines well, and gets super motivated to play extraordinary, and that's what happened with England in this situation. We saw Manu Tuilagi go into the forwards and become an extra flanker as a result of Tom Curry going off, and I've got to hand it to Tuilagi. In that position he played very well and kept his part going for the English forwards. But it was through the forwards that England started to control this game and put a lot of pressure on the Argentinians, particularly at scrum time, and we saw a couple of penalties to England because Argentina's scrum was being disrupted just through the power and the weight of Genge and his fellow colleagues in the front row. Now, the reason I picked Argentina in this game was because I thought that Santiago Carreras at first 5 for Argentina was going to be able to set their backline alight and give England a really hard time in defence. And we'd seen England's poor defence in the backline in previous games, and I thought that might be their weakest link in this game as far as Argentina went. But unfortunately, Argentina lost Santiago Carreras to a yellow card as well in the very beginning of the game. And I think that unsettled the Argentinians because they didn't have their maestro on the field to be able to orchestrate some strategy around what England was doing to them. So I think that 10 minutes that Carreras was off with a yellow card did make a difference to Argentina. They just lost that little bit of leadership that Santiago Carreras provides at first 5. By the time Carreras came back on the field, England were in some ascendancy in this game. And as I said, their defence was big, it was up fast on Argentina, and every time they tried to do something through the back line, Argentina was shut down. Now this made them a little bit nervous, and I started seeing them become a little bit like the All Blacks. They became clueless in ways in which they were going to break down this defence. Now this is something that's starting to unravel in this year's Rugby World Cup already in the first weekend. We're seeing teams, when they're up against a great defensive line, having troubles to break it down and come up with innovative ideas on how to get around this defence. We saw it with the All Blacks against France, and now we've seen it with Argentina against England. So that's something that those two teams are definitely going to have to work on if they go forward in this year's Rugby World Cup. So as England continued to put the ascendancy on Argentina in that first half, the penalties kept coming, and George Ford had his kicking boots on this particular day, so he was knocking over the penalties. But we saw something that we hadn't seen from since the 1970s in this game, and that was called the invention called the drop goal. Yes, the drop goal has made its way back into World Rugby, and George Ford introduced that to the game again yesterday. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in the first half. George Ford dropped goals for England and helped them keep the scoreboard ticking over. Whereas on the other side, Argentina were just not able to put any pressure on England towards their own half or even in their own 22. We got to half time, it was 12-3 to England. We'd had a kick fest all the first half, and neither team really looked like they were going to score a try at that stage in this game. And it was really disappointing from an England point of view. I think in terms of each time that they had an opportunity to put it wide, some of the times they took it and the Argentinian defence was up to it, or England would make a little bit of a handling error, or the other factor was that England used the ball to kick a lot, and George Ford was definitely doing that yesterday. Quite a lot of the English forwards were having a big game in this match in the first half, and as I mentioned, we had Manu Tuilagi come in at flanker to play well, but Earl at number 8 was going well. Courtney Laws was actually being seen in this game, which was a good thing, and Itoje was big as well, and I think England needed to have a big performance from Itoje yesterday. He stepped up and played very, very well. Chisholm was in there as well, and I think the front row for England was doing very well. Joe Marchand got the ball on a couple of occasions in the back line and looked dangerous, but it was really George Ford with his boot that was doing all the damage for England against Argentina. Freddie Stewart did a couple of good catches of high balls. He injected himself once or twice in the first half into the back line. But unfortunately, once again, Johnny May and Elliot Daly didn't get to see the ball. I think Daly touched the ball twice, and that was to take long-range shots at penalty kicks. So again, England are not using their weapons, and this is something that I'd really love to see from this team, is to get these guys more and more ball so they can have opportunities at running at and around defences, but it's just not happening because the ball gets kicked a lot of the time. So I'm sure Steve Borthwick would have been happy at half time with England. They'd set up the platform to win this game, and that would have been their first priority, don't forget, is to start off the tournament with a win. I think Michael Cheika would have been really upset, first of all, with the discipline of the Argentinians. They really let themselves down in terms of getting into this game, and a lot of that came because of the pressure that England were putting on them. So I think in the second half, Cheika would have wanted his team to look at running the ball more. They weren't getting a lot of possession. I think that their count at half time was around about 69 to 31 possession in favour of England. And I think Argentina would have wanted to come out and use the possession that they had to try and create ways to get around this England defence. And that would have meant by putting some kicks over the top of their defence and also kicking smarter in general play. So the first 20 minutes of the second half was a repeat of what we saw in the first half. We saw 4 penalties in that first 20 minutes of the second half to George Ford. We saw England putting on heavy defence to Argentina so they couldn't break the line. And we saw a fairly repetitive and boring nature to this game. And England honestly didn't look like scoring any tries in this game as that second half got to its halfway point. Argentina, on the other hand, were at least trying a few things, and they weren't making much progress, and they didn't really look like they had any game breakers in this game, and that's what the disappointing part was for me. When Boffelli got the ball out on the wing a couple of times, he didn't have a sidestep. He just ran into the defence, dropped himself down and tried to set up a second phase of play. I think you're looking for your wingers to be able to do something smart. If you look at Cheslin Colby and Will Jordan and these people in the tournament, they use their strength and power to go in and around a man. The likes of Boffelli, they just run into the opposition and create turnover ball, and I think that just indicates some of the class that some of these other teams have. Anyway, Argentina weren't able to get through that English defence, and we were heading towards the end of the game, and we thought, well, can England actually score a try in this game, and when are we going to see Marcus Smith come on? Because once again, Steve Borthwick left it till the very later stages of this game to bring on Marcus Smith. Now, some people say in my comments that Marcus Smith isn't the wonder kid that a lot of people think he is, but I tell you what, he is somebody that can ignite something in the background. He is a visionary, and he gives a different look at defences. That's what I like about Marcus Smith. So to leave him sitting on the bench for 70 minutes of the game, I think is an injustice to England. Even though they're winning the game by a substantial amount, surely you want to get somebody like that on the field of play and give the backs an opportunity to score some tries, because that's what England need to do if they're going to progress and get a chance of winning this year's Rugby World Cup. They're not going to be able to kick their way to a Rugby World Cup victory. They've got to find other ways to win games. They've got to find other ways to put significant points on teams, because George Ford, Owen Farrell and the rest are not going to have their kicking boots on sufficiently enough every single game to do what happened yesterday. So we had to wait until the 79th minute of this game before we got a try, and it was to Argentina. So thank you, Bruni, for scoring a great try in the last minute of this game, and kudos to Argentina. 16 phases of play, their best set of play in the whole match yesterday, and it ended up culminating in a try to them in the death of this game. So put a little bit of respectability in the score, but why hadn't they done that and achieved that earlier in the game? And that's something that Michael Cheika and his crew are going to be very frustrated at, I'm sure, because we saw the real Argentina, I thought, in the last 5 minutes of that game. They started heaping the pressure on England, and England were probably getting pretty tired because they'd been down to 14 men for the whole game. So there we go, it was 27 points to 10, the final score in this first Pool D game for England and Argentina. George Ford scoring all the points for England with his boot, drop goals and penalty kicks. Argentina, it was Boffelli with a penalty and a conversion and a try to Bruni. So that was the score, 27-10. England will be happy. They've won their first game in the Rugby World Cup. From my point of view, it wasn't a rugby spectacle at all. It was winning ugly, and I think that's how England wanted to probably start off their campaign to give themselves a little bit of confidence. On the other hand, I think Argentina's got a lot of work to do, and based on that performance yesterday, they've gone down in my expectations a little bit, because I was disappointed. I was disappointed to see they didn't have that creativity to get through the English defensive patterns, and I think that's something Michael Cheika and his crew are going to work on, because when they come up to the quarterfinal stage, if they make it there, then Argentina are going to have ways to breaking down defenses and scoring a lot more tries, and this has been perhaps their Achilles heel in previous games as well. So a few good standout players for Argentina. I thought Lavini played really well. Matera in the forwards, of course, playing very, very well. Good clean out ball from those guys. They were busy both in the scrums and also in the breakdowns. Petrino at halfback had a pretty average game. Santiago Carreras didn't live up to the expectations that I thought. Choco Barreras in the centres was busy in defence, but only had one good run in attack. And we didn't see enough of the Argentinian wingers and Malia at fullback making too many offensive patterns in this game, and that's something that Argentina will have to work on, I'm sure. For England, a very good display, I thought, from hard-working group of players, because when you're down to 14 men, you have to put in a lot of energy, particularly in defence, and that's what they did. So if I am to give England a bit of kudos in this game, taking away the boring nature of this win and the ugliness of the win, they did play very well in defence, and all players that I saw and was watching participated in that. So a good scrum for England. They were disruptive in the lineouts again. Itoje doing a very good job there. Courtney Laws and Earl as well in the forwards were doing a very, very good job. So yeah, I think England played fairly well when it came to their defensive patterns. Alex Mitchell, while he was on the field, was good, but I like Danny Kerr, and when Danny Kerr comes on, he brings that extra pace to that English distribution platform, and I think that's going to be something important going forward. So we'll have to see whether Danny Kerr gets some starts in this year's Rugby World Cup. Of course, George Ford was probably everybody's man in the match from an England point of view, and probably deserved it. And thank you, George Ford, for bringing the drop goal back into fashion. Maybe we're going to see that a little bit more in the Rugby World Cup. And then outside him, Joe Marchant, as I said, had a few opportunities. Tuolagi played most of the game at flanker, and Freddie Stewart was pretty solid at fullback yesterday. So a comprehensive win in numbers for England, not a comprehensive win as far as attractiveness of rugby, but in this Rugby World Cup, I guess it's a situation of winning games, and that's what England did yesterday. So let me know in the comments what you thought of this game. If you're an England fan, were you happy with the way they played? They got the job done, of course, but give me your other thoughts around this game. Argentinian fans, what do you think? Were you a little bit upset as well with the way Argentina played yesterday, or was it a fact that England put too much pressure on Argentina that they couldn't deal with? I'd like to hear your points of view, and if you're a neutral supporter out there just loving this Rugby World Cup, drop me your comments as well. I'd love to hear from you on what you thought about this game. Okay, well, that's it for this particular video. Lots of rugby again today as we head into the Sunday of this year's first weekend of Rugby World Cup. Very, very exciting matches coming up today, and I'm going to be making reviews on those games, so make sure you stick around by hitting the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Until then, stay safe, stay well everybody, and keep enjoying Rugby World Cup 2023. Bye for now.